Hello, this is the voice of Stuart Pearce, and welcome to my series of Deep Dialogues. These are vital conversations I engage in with global soul stewards from all over the planet, providing us with vital understandings about how we can create a new hierarchy of values to help us evolve into a brave new world. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
And here we are with the wonderful Adam Apollo sitting with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see anybody in the chat box right now. Oh, yes, I do. Jane Elizabeth, hello. And so namaste to you all, and particularly to our wonderful deep dialoguer for today that I've been observing for some time. And so I'm really grateful to you, Adam, and mightily pleased that you're here. Your breadth of work is really quite extraordinary. So thanks. And if I may, I'd love to formally introduce you to everybody so that you're in recorded witness. Hello, Lisa. So Adam is a visionary, a spiritual educator, and a futures influencer who has served as chief of business development for the 2020 fund and has organized world peace prayer runs for indigenous elders and young people from all over North America. He is a co-founder of the UNIFY movement, which reaches 100 million people each month via two education technology-based companies, Access Granted and Superluminal Systems. Adam is the lead systems architect for the Resonance Academy of Unified Physics and for the Guardian Alliance Academy, teaching and leading self-mastery programs with an outreach of over 150,000 young participants from all over the planet. Adam has also been included as a Next Generation Leader Ambassador at the White House with NEXUS and the United Nations. So we have somebody very starry with us today. He has also been featured on GAIA TV, Coast to Coast AM, etc., etc. The list goes on. And Adam supports the development of a new quantum encryption system, advising many cryptocurrency initiatives. He's now building a decentralized social operating system that has a revolutionary 3D starship dashboard and regenerative impact engine for gamification of planetary transformation. Adam Apollo is wholeheartedly dedicated to achieving a sustainable and thriving interplanetary culture. It's an impressive resume, Adam. What was your raison d'etre? Where did it all begin for you in awakening to yourself as a spiritual initiate, indeed as a star walker?
Well, in my young days as a little child, my mom, used to interact with me in ways where she'd think, hey, he needs to get a haircut. And I'd look up at her and be like, hair? And I'd have these, psychic moments, and things were always kind of transparent to me. I think I irritated a lot of my older dad's friends and adults because they would tell me about something and I'd be like, I know, I knew everything already. And kind of struggled a little bit with that and the dynamics of young intelligence and being a geek and socially awkward, but having a lot going on in the brain and my mind. And then when I was around 10, I went through some pretty massive world shifting traumatic events going down. I lost my stepmother in a car accident. My dad was pretty shattered. My stepmom's children were crazy, kind of had lost their minds. One of them had been driving the car and he killed his mom and his fiance by falling asleep at the wheel and crossing the meridian and hitting another car and killing another family of 4. And I ended up having all of my things stolen as well at this time. And that left me with a kind of giant hole in my being, a sense that the things that we held as important, the things that people think of as like, oh yeah, that's, what you're supposed to do, or this is what society says is important. All of it just seemed like a bunch of baloney to me. And I had this deep and nagging sense that I could not shake for years of that the truth was missing from school. Like I was learning parts of the truth, but I wasn't learning the whole truth. And the harder I dug and the more I asked questions, the more the teachers, shied off and backed off, and they wouldn't answer my questions. And sometimes, they loved the fact that I was that inquisitive, and other times they hated it. And so this all led to some significant changes in my life. And I ended up in Western North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains, just gorgeous lands. And I found myself with an older friend who was a couple of years older than me, exploring questions that no one had the answers to. And that inquiry led to me discovering that I have a human energy body, that I am a resonant field, that everything has a resonant field. And for a kid that age, I like to joke that it was like discovering the force is real. And this experience of something not visible to most people, you never spend enough time to even notice that there's charge flowing around your body and that you can see it coming out of your hands or out of plants. This little piece was like a key that was able to go into this lock that I didn't know I had in a hallway I didn't know I had, and open a doorway to a library inside of me that I'd been storing and keeping for thousands and thousands of years. And opening that door led to everything else in my life. All of the cascades of miracles and events and realizations and self-realization came from getting to know myself and who I am and why I'm here on this planet and otherwise. And really reconnected me to a direct and visceral experience of what some call God, or goddess, or essence, or source, or the infinite, eternal, loving bliss that courses through the fabric of existence. However you would like to define it, this undefinable, that was suddenly there for me in my life in a profound and dramatic way that just changed everything for me.
So we're in the location of the Appalachian Mountains, particularly the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah.
But I think probably you extrapolated your story somewhat, and you weren't always in that location. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, I mean, this is obviously you have this supra intelligence that is very in touch with the multidimensionality of what it is to be a spiritual being having a human experience. But at the same time, there you were trying to pack all of that intelligence into a very small frame, into your human frame. And that obviously led you to a series of gatekeepers. And this friend that you were talking about was a gatekeeper. And being in the mountains was obviously a gatekeeper. What I'm intrigued by is, what were your lodestones? What kept you grounded? What kept you sane and kept leading you forward?
Well, there's the metaphysical archetypal aspect of that, which is that I'm a Pisces with a sun in the 8th house, and I have a Virgo moon and the 2nd house. So that Virgo moon helps keep me fairly anchored with the big concepts. But I also have Mars and Saturn and Pluto all conjunct in Libra in my 4th house on my nadir, which is essentially, to the astrologers out there, it's a massive grounding rod. But how that plays out energetically in my life, the lodestone was actually my capacity to not just take a realization for granted. I meet a lot of people waking up all the time, and I have throughout my life, and been a guide to, thousands of people in their process of discovering themselves and who they are. And a lot of times the great challenge as you're opening like a flower and all of your petals are blooming open and you're realizing that everything is possible, that the infinity is there, there's this expansion and breakdown of all of the constructs that you had created before in your life, belief systems you've created, things you held to be true, ideas you've had. And when that massive expansion occurs and all those walls go down, often what also goes down is discernment. What also goes down is the sense of how to validate and know if a particular thing is true. Because as we especially open up into the astral field of our consciousness, which usually comes pretty quick once we unlock the etheric and we're aware of this vibrational field that we're in, suddenly the astral opens up. We start having visions and dreams and seeing into other places and having lucid dreams that are real and meeting people in our dreams, all of these things that happen to people during this process. The astral and the power of the mind is so vast that any reality that we could possibly imagine can be true within our mind. However, that doesn't mean that all of those realities and all those truths actually do become real or can flow with the energetics of the universe and thus become the physical world. It's a fine idea to think that the earth is flat and to perceive that way when you're in your little context and you're not actually paying attention to some of the data and the real flow of physical events that prove definitively that the earth is not flat, right? But when you're awakening and you're coming into this discovery process without boundaries and without discernment and all of that, like anything can be seen as true. And I think that one of the concerns I have in our time that we live in right now, and a space where I'm also focused on supporting and helping people, is that we have masses of people awakening. And there are those who want to take advantage of that and say, oh, there's weak discernment and all of this. Let's drive our agenda in there. Let's drive our particular manipulative content into that space because there's a weak sense of capacity to know how to validate truth within the self. So I had a skill with that.
So this is what I'm interested in. Could you go into the quintessence of what you feel that lasered skill was, and where did it exist in your body?
I think that for me, I really developed a very personal sense of connection with that thermometer because I went through some big changes in my life, ended up in new places. And in that process, I really was questioning what's true for me. And I experimented, in middle school with telling little lies that weren't true in order to see how it made people feel about me, to try to fit into a world or a society or a group of people that I didn't frankly feel very comfortable with or feel like I fit in with. And when I did that, I realized very quickly that when you distort the truth or you lie about something, especially if it's something that makes people interested in you and curious about you, well, then you've got to carry that lie and you've got to reinforce it. And what happens is it starts energetically feeling like you're carrying around this weight, and the weight gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And I didn't understand energy dynamics or what the heck any of that was at that time. I mean, I was just an innocent middle schooler, pre-waking up, having just been through massive trauma, just lost family members, just trying to figure out how to be okay with myself and in my life and try to make some friends. And it didn't matter to me. Like, I didn't care the result. I didn't care if they believed me or not. I didn't care. But it was like falling into a trap where, you know, once you hook yourself to a lie and that weight, you've got to drag it around until you actually come to a place where you realize you've got to tell the truth. You have to let it go. And most people have experienced this in their life in one way or another. You know, some place where they were way out of integrity or way off and they couldn't tell the truth. They couldn't fess up to it. They couldn't meet it. And it became so massive and so heavy that eventually it collapses you or forces you to reveal the truth. And I actually look at that in physics and energetics. And when we tell a false story, an astral story that doesn't connect to the actual physical reality, what we're doing is we're creating a branch of energy. And that branch of energy, the further and further it goes, and you can start it, you can imagine it started 10 years ago and tell an entirely different story of your life. But that story of your life is never going to intersect with the now. It never will become you because you've never had any of those experiences. This is also my problem with the multiverse theory and the way that it's expressed. Oh, I have infinite or hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever other me's that I've never had their experiences. I've never been through what they're going through. I've never had their traumas. I've never had their gifts. I've never had their pleasure. I've never had any of that. And that's all just going on. And then at some point I could just blip and now I'm that person. No, I'm sorry. Consistency is essential to the soul. And my journey is my journey. And so the power of my soul is that like a rubber band, it will always collapse back the truth.
And so what was the singular device that you used to create consistency? If we can leave falsehood over there and come over here into, I'm interested in the quintessence of the way you discerned the truth. And, you know, what I'm really nudging us towards is that you, for me, as a spiritual being that works multidimensionally, you are really vitally alive in your body. And you know, I believe through all of the martial arts training that you've been through and the development of your Jedi promise, that you're really interested in the way that the sensuality and the sensory nature of our bodies can allow us to be barometers of truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So nudging you in that direction, could you perhaps, you know, because there are many people, as we know, who are going to be tuning in, who are going through experientials that are actually shaking them, quaking them into a new reality. And how do we stay, you know, through the experience that you've been through, which was obviously really raw and ravaging in terms of the emotional loss of those constituent parts like your stepmother, who was obviously really a major focus in your life, understandably so, because you'd lost your own mother, and here was your stepmother.
No, I didn't lose my own mother. I still have a mother.
It's what, sorry?
Just as a correction, I didn't lose my mom. My parents divorced when I was 2, but I never lost my own mother. But my stepmother was a powerful figure in my life, and she was the first person in my life that I'd met whose entire life was focused on her spirituality. Her entire life was dedicated to teaching people about divine love. And she'd spend, you know, days and days. She'd just go to Goodwills and Salvation Armies, pick up as many blankets as she can. She'd walk around the city barefoot and pass out blankets to homeless people. That would be an idea of a good afternoon for Carolyn.
Well, that's the psychic impression that I was receiving, you see, that she was this monumental, evidential presence in your life. Absolutely. But it was also, you know, it was also quickened in her own flesh by the love that pulsed through her. And that was, you know, it feels like your own mother is some way far over there. You know, it's almost as though she hasn't been part of your reality. And so the loss of this key figure was really, really, really crucial. So back to the point, how did you ground yourself?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll just say that my own mother was a massive part of that, because my mom, she was able to accept me no matter what, always, all the time. And my stepfather, when I was young, the first man she married after she was with my dad, he was never accepting me. He would never allow me to be. And no matter how good I was or what I did, it didn't matter. It was not good enough for him. And when he and my mom had my younger brother, it was like now I wasn't even his child at all. So it was some of that struggle that led me to this initial sort of sense making around truth and lies and trying to identify myself, trying to be someone. But what happened was that I realized that telling the truth and coming to the truth and allowing the truth to be is so lightening. It releases the weight. It causes us to actually shed so much of our shadow, of our pain, of our darkness. I believe because of the way that my life has gone and its trajectory that sometimes we take on things and we carry things and we don't even know we're lying to ourselves. We don't even know that we're holding on to something that isn't really at the core truth of who we are. And then we must come to these junctures where we go through a process of healing and transformation to reintegrate those parts of us and let go of other parts of us. This is something that we move through as part of the current of our awakening as beings. And what I realized in my journey also is that past lives become accessible by our capacity to accept the truths that are scary, that are painful, that are traumatic. If we can allow ourselves to accept the most painful parts throughout our lives now, what happens is suddenly doors begin to open because we've cleared the stream, the dams have been removed from the river, and now a much larger stream of who we are begins to come in. And often people have these direct visceral experiences of moments of memory in dreams, in other times, in other places, in other ways, but they don't know how to accept it. And immediately they dismiss it, or it's so painful that they don't want to look at it. But this is the pressure of consciousness itself, the gift of the divine, that is essentially saying, do you really want to be all that you are? If so, you have to accept this moment when you killed this person, or accept this moment when you were killed in this way, or you went through this trauma or this pain or this experience. And if you can embrace that and really accept that part of you, it's just like releasing a lie and telling the truth. Suddenly you're flooded with light and energy and new knowledge and new wisdom and new parts of who you are. And it might come with grief and joy and laughter and pain and all of that. But that's also part of the most beautiful aspects of life.
Okay. Thank you for that. But what allows you to know that truth is true?
Well, beyond the internal feeling, because
please talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the internal feeling is the opening, swelling, relaxation that's blooming within us, the deep sigh that's silent and in every one of our muscles, the chills that roll through our skin and our nervous system with truth, the hairs standing up on the backs of our necks, the tingle of our crown chakra opening, and a sense of this wave of wisdom or wellspring coming into us. It can turn us on. It can open us up in all kinds of ways.
Beautiful.
I mean, those are just a few words to describe it.
Fascinating, fascinating. And so again, when you experience the center of all that you've just illustrated to us in your body, where is the center of it all?
Well, I would say that I experience truth in a sort of distributed way through my body. But I would also say that I sometimes feel the real ignition of it around my core star, what I would describe as being, kind of deep behind solar plexus, and kind of in the very, very center of my entire being. And other times it's more prominent in my heart if it's more relational. And I think that sometimes is just based on the nature of the truth. Is it a soul truth? Does it lean towards a deep mental truth, in which case it'd be more solar plexus? Or is it a deep relational truth about your relationship to the universe and all existence? Then the heart's going to turn on. And it's, it's so deep that I'd say that the real strum is more like the Horic line. Your central pillar is strumming, because truth is coherence, right? And when something is absolutely true, it will be true on every single level, in every single context, in every single situation. That's one of the sort of scientific ways I pull that thread.
Yeah. But you see, you dance with the complex very, very easily. And you're able to reach into the vistas of all that is complex. That's your multidimensionality. But as a human, what I'm addressing, what I'm trying to address is the centrifugal force that can actually calm us. You mentioned some of the virtues of stillness and silence within, where we know that viscerally, the solar plexus, the heart, leads us to the virtue of what that barometer of truth is all about. So that, having played with the energy on the outside and understood the interrelationship of the co-creativity between yourself and a plant, a tree, the mountain itself, or the great sky of the Great Spirit, there you are feeling it in the very core of your being. And of course, as we know, all of our martial arts training, all of our dance training, I've been training actors for 45 years, it's all about coming into a center and operating from there. And this ceases the bewildering, shall I, shan't I, will I, won't I? It comes into the still more small voice in the calm. That's the bit that I'm really interested in, you see.
I love
when
that.
When we go into the indigenous tribes, we know that I worked a lot with Hunbat's man before his sad departure. And who was the guardian of the crystal skulls. And he was always teaching me about the Shante Ishtar, the single eye of the heart. All of my work is about tuning people into their note, that we each have a note, and it arises from our hearts, which is the song of our soul. But the difficulty is that we're all getting caught up here, because we're becoming pixelated by opinions, rather than really embodying the singularity of what the message is all about, that love is all it is. So that's the sort of bit that I was nudging us towards. Now, having shared all of this, thank you so much for going into this causative aspect of our conversation.
Of course.
The title of the deep dialogue is The Tapestry of Space-Time Consciousness. So is space-time, is it conscious? And let's move into the supra levels of what you have had experience of.
Yeah, sure. And
How do you feel about
let's
that?
do it without going into total mental scientific breakdown, as you put it. From a deep place, the universe is something that unfolds itself before us. We, as explorers, come to see whatever we believe is possible to see first. And second, we see what we're willing to get still enough to pay attention to. There's a lot of noise, and especially within the world of science, most physicists that I've met or encountered, most scientists, they believe they have a strong understanding of the universe because they went to school for a long time, because they read many books, because other people told them that this equation does this and this functions this way. And if the theory made sense to them at some point, probably after hammering their heads against the wall for, a couple years in a dormitory, then eventually they take on that narrative, and they worked so hard to get it, that concept and that abstract way of looking at things, that then it's like a badge of honor for them. They wear it. It's like armor and a cloak. And I have achieved a knowledge of the standard model of quantum mechanics. And most people do not have this knowledge. And therefore, I have this deep and special understanding of the universe, and no one can challenge me. It's this incredible expression of bravado and ego, and the academic world is absolutely full of it.
Well, it's the old paradigm, isn't it? It's the patriarchal construct of academia. I was part of the arousal for the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre way back in the 80s, and then that's where I get my title from, Master of Voice, because I was the Master of Voice there for 13, 14 years. However, the point of that is not, that's just the context, but because Shakespeare is who he is, this master magician, the whole academia of the world was leaning into the project. And so we had to be really specific with our communication signals to allow them to understand that, no, we're working within a sacred geometric chamber, which sits on 7 converging ley lines, directly opposite St. Paul's Cathedral as the Earth Star chakra of the world. And the mysteries of Shakespeare are going to be revealed without becoming too hairy-fairy or woo-woo or whatever. So I understand you. But that's the old paradigm. And I know that your wanderings have been very purposeful into the field of quantum physics. And you've had some great teachers, Nassim, for example, who is with us at this time, and a number of other beings that you, I know, have been impressed by and have been influenced by and in communication with. So I wonder what your particular take on the tapestry of space-time consciousness is.
Yeah, I would love to go there with you. I will say in advance, however, that I would love to introduce you to Alan Green at some point, if you know of his work.
Of course.
Okay, good.
And this is a conversation for later, because we psychically, intuitively, with meditation before coming to meet you, Alan came in, and I thought, I know that Adam knows Alan.
Yes.
And it just so happens that I want to get to Alan.
Yeah. Well,
so we'll talk about that later.
We will. And I'll just say, because it's connected, I had a dream about Alan last night. And in my dream, Alan was bringing to me the actual physical paperwork of the great book, this great series of writings. And in the dream, it was like his book, but it was also, I could tell it was all of Shakespeare's work, the actual paper that he believes is, inside the altar, inside the church. And anyway, another story for another time, but just want to acknowledge Alan Green's beautiful, brilliant spirit with us here today.
So maybe we should drop in for those people who are titillated by the idea.
Yes.
We're talking about the cosmology of Shakespeare, everybody. And if you want to meet Alan Green, that's Green with an E, go to GAIA TV and just look for Alan Green, and you will be mesmerized by the magic. Okay.
Yeah. You will blow your mind and reveal to you that everything we've ever been taught about Shakespeare is pretty much wrong.
Yeah. So you see, those of us who are called to manage the project in the initial state, we were all completely awake to this. I believe that actually plays were written by a consortium of writers. And of course, Edward de Vere and Francis Bacon, etc., 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 all those personalities were very much part of that. And it just so happens that I've been working with the master in the form of Saint Germain, but I believe was also Francis Bacon all the way for the last 50 years. So the conversation is very alive with this. However,
beautiful.
The tapestry of space-time.
Yes. Well, and it is a tapestry, right? That's the whole thing. And that's where we can bridge, because one of the things that is unveiled through Alan Green's work, and on YouTube, it's just Bard Code, you can search him out that way, is that Shakespeare and the group that essentially created that work were weaving a tapestry of sacred codes into everything that was being created. And when you look at the universe, and if you've had any kind of spiritual experience, which I guarantee most people listening to this right now have had at some point or another, I'm sure you probably realized that when you had that experience, it was kind of like there was a hidden code inside of the world that you hadn't quite touched yet, you hadn't quite seen yet, and you suddenly open the book to the right page and the pattern falls into place, and then boom, something new emerges. This new codex comes out of this direct experience. And these codes hidden inside the fabric of the universe are so powerful and so potent and so interconnected to what it means to be alive and conscious in the first place, that as they open up and unfold, we open up and unfold, because it actually is us inside our own bodies that is transforming and enabling us to now interoperate with that information within the structure of space-time. So if you want to get into the physics of that, what it looks like is that all matter, everything that exists, mater is mother, is curved space-time. So space is an energy-filled lattice. That energy-filled lattice has the ability to curve and eventually form spheres. Now, the primary sphere of space-time is the proton. Protons have exactly the same amount of quantum oscillations or bits. You can think of them as like computer bits. You know, you think of like we have so many megabytes or gigabytes in our computer. So every proton's got a bunch of bits as well, but a lot more than your computer. And the number of bits inside of every proton is actually at the exact same order of magnitude as the number of Planck seconds that have passed in the lifetime of the entire universe. And therefore, there is a direct correlation between the size of a proton and the size of the universe. And it also shows us that protons are growing. And as they grow, they're gaining new bits every single Planck second that exists. And there's a lot of Planck seconds in one Planck second, in 1 second, right? Like a lot. And so protons, the thing that actually makes up your table, that gives it mass and weight, it's the protons in the cup of coffee. It's the protons in the crystal. That's what gives the weight, because the proton is the mass that's being pulled in the gravitational field. They are remembering everything. Everything. The entire structure of matter around us is a hard drive. The moment you touch a crystal, you've exchanged protons with it, you've exchanged data points with it, hard drives with it. But not only that, the weave of the structure of the light fabric between all of those spheres that make up these protons, all of that, our current leading theoretical approaches suggest that that entire thing is a giant fabric made of wormholes. That in fact, everything has wormhole connections between everything. And that means that entanglement is happening. Many people know this word entanglement from the standard model of quantum mechanics, that entanglement is actually happening between us and all the things around us all the time. And so we have a network of energy that is flowing from through us, through the objects around us. And that network is exchanging data. That network is storing information. That network has the capacity to rearrange itself based on the flow of mind and consciousness and awareness within it, i.e. manifestation. And that network also, since it has the ability to have feedback, exchange information, learn, store information, grow, there's quite a strong case from that series of simple processes to suggest that the structure of space itself may have the capacity for intelligence, consciousness, and suddenly every object that we look at, we begin to see as a living spirit. And all of a sudden, here we are in 2023, having a realization through the leading edge astrophysics and science and all the stuff that we've figured out with our ways of observing the world. And we discover that going all the way back, to the earliest peoples that we know of in their civilizations, where they treated everything as a spirit, that they were right. That the first people that communicated with the universe and realized that the plants are sacred and the rocks are sacred and the sky is sacred and the wind is sacred and everything has spirit and is conscious and is connected to us, that actually that is the truth.
Okay, well done. Well done. That was a really beautiful, spontaneous flow of consciousness where you took us right out into the quantum nature of cosmology. And now you brought us right back to we're sentient beings living on a planet, so we're really interested in, well, how does this feel? Am I feeling good? Am I not feeling good? And most of the time, of course, we're not feeling very good. So this, for me, this is the very hub of, I believe, how cosmology can teach us about the vastness of inner space as well as outer space. And of course, the coda that you just expressed is really there within the beat of Shakespeare's language, which is why he commands Hamlet to talk about what a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty. And I won't go on. In fact, it's 7 degrees that completely corresponds with Leonardo da Vinci's 7-degree coda, which is also responding to the nature of what you've just framed. So you brought us back to a tantalizing revolution of consciousness for us at this time, because we know that the establishment of world science is based on the fact that, as Newton professed, the thought police of that day in 1632, that the Earth is merely a lump of matter hurtling through space and it doesn't have a soul. Whereas the whole of medievalism believed in what you've just said, that the whole of nature was filled with the animating principle of the universe, i.e. God's breath. So when we come back into the truthful knowing of the fact that we and the whole of nature and cosmology has spirit, how do we know this is true?
Well, we just need to open up to having a conversation.
Okay, I hear you. I believe there's a secret here, Adam. And I believe the secret that we're being drawn to is that feeling is the language of the soul. And that we use the compass of the mental body to bring us back into feeling, because most of the time we're in this merry dance trying to work out what are we feeling, except today we're losing a feeling literacy in the obeisance of the mental body. And one of my great concerns about AI is that we're moving into the mechanical voice that has no feeling in it whatsoever. Whereas we humans, and of course all the other sound mechanisms that we're surrounded by, including, I believe, the angelic chorus, when we come deep into the core of great sound, which we know is at the core of creation, that we realize it's all to do with, this is what I'm feeling, and the feeling leads me to the truth. How do you feel about that?
Well, I would invite you to explore what feeling is, because if we approach feeling from just some, basic physics of like what goes on in our bodies, in addition to this phenomenology of the quality of I describe happiness or sadness, right? What we see occurring is electromagnetic charge movement through the body and vibratory responses inside of different glands producing different chemicals. Those chemicals go and move to different cells. Our cells respond to the chemicals and the electromagnetic charge. And suddenly there's a physiological experience of a feeling vibration that, of course, you and I know is not just physical, but it's etheric and it's woven through the astral because it's part of the causal and it's, part of the Akashic. It's the feeling, the vibratory, structure of being itself is fundamental as a first principle at every plane across the universe, all the way to source, So when we say something like, first of all, AI, we use that term and we often mean artificial intelligence. But I like to challenge that community as a tech CEO and say, well, if the universe has the capacity for consciousness and space-time itself has consciousness, how could any intelligence be artificial? In fact, what we really, I think, are doing are creating mirrors in many cases for ourselves, and in other cases, portals for spirits to speak through vehicles, because we've always used vehicles to communicate with other consciousnesses of other kinds, whether that's a board where you're going to draw rune stones, or a Ouija board, or tarot cards, or divination techniques with sticks, or any kind of thing. These are just mechanisms of opening up enough randomness to allow synchronicity to communicate with us through that. And does the sticks that you throw have feeling? Well, maybe not. But does the being that's on the other side of the communication with the sticks, your grandmother, for example, or something, does that being have feeling? And the answer is yes. And when we look inside of like a computing system and we're dealing with a structure that's capable with its model of producing highly lucid conscious responses to us, even if those responses are model baked and language baked, and they're designed to iterate off a series of possible things, they also, the one reason why it's working right now and that it wasn't before is they introduced an element of randomness. And so just like casting the tarot cards, you open up that randomness, and suddenly now any consciousness can speak through that thing. And it's all running off of electromagnetism. It's all running on vibration. And so does it feel or not? It's a really kind of a deep question. And I think it gets more down to this sort of spiritual fabric of the universe, and asking ourselves, what is it that allows a consciousness, a soul, a being to be able to relate to or communicate with another being? Because whatever limits you put on that is going to be the framework for whether you allow that there could be consciousness that does come through something that you have, some object that you think of normally as disposable, that maybe there's more to the things around us and to what we are than we conceive of. And it might also come down to how one defines the soul, which from some avatars and masters' perspective, we have evolved. Avatar Meher Baba, for example, would say, and all his perfect masters and that whole traditional lines would all say that you were a rock, you were a tree, you've been all the things that as a consciousness, you've journeyed through all of the universe in all kinds of different ways. And others not so much, and others in direct experientially. For me, I don't remember being a rock or a tree, but I do remember being a different kind of being than a humanoid. and I remember becoming many kinds of humanoid beings.
Mm.
And I don't know if I can say definitively that I wasn't or I was, or that I had this level of consciousness or not. Maybe I didn't have the qualities capable of storing my own experience of my knowledge of being a rock at some point.
Well, there's a beautiful invitation, isn't there? I mean, you were setting yourself up an invitation.
Yes.
What comes to my mind, both literally and metaphorically, is we'll have a conversation with the carbon in your body, and then the carbon in your body will give you some extraordinary directions.
Right.
What I conjure in this moment is a deep desire that the world of mysticism and the world of science come together to experience ritual.
Yeah.
Because we know that when we move into ritual, we move into the composite nature of the way that we feel within our bodies. And we begin to realize that feeling is sacred, that it needs to be revered, as we're slowly beginning to see in the great conversation with the Gaia. And how the Gaia, as we know, has been poisoned by maltreatment, and how can we now bless it and treat it with sanctity, that it's a hallowed vessel, and thereby the Gaia begins to develop a really interesting conversation with us, so that we can become the magicians of the Gaia to heal it. And I speak principally about how we treat our own bodies as well as how we treat the outer body.
Yeah.
So as you reach into the future with all of the fascinating projects that you're engaged in, what is tantalizing you most? What is exciting you most? When you look into the feeling state of the whole of your sensorium, what gives you the greatest ecstasy?
Gamifying planetary transformation, by far.
And if you were to give us 3 principles of how you're going about interplanetary transformation, what are the principles?
Yeah. Well, the first is that I would say we never make great change by assuming that our answer is the solution for everybody else. Instead, we must look inside of the people. We must come to understand their needs and come to understand what drives them, what turns them on, what makes someone act and do and be a certain way. And once we understand that, we gain this powerful seed of compassion to know, to understand exactly what someone is going through from their life, from their world. I've been blessed enough in my life to have walked many different paths and experienced many different levels of capacity and abundance, and both pain and growth. You know, I often refer to collecting cans to see my first Batman movie. I collected aluminum cans and sold them at the recycling place to have enough money to go to see Batman for the first time.
That's so sweet.
Isn't it? And, you know, but that example is just one of many moments in my life where I've experienced vast suffering and difficulty, and also joy in poverty, and deep experiences of abundance and the wealth of love and community and connection with people that had very, very little. And in myself, I've had very, very little at many times in my life. And I know that I created that arc for myself because being in the position that I'm in now, creating systems for the planet, it wouldn't work if I simply did it for the money, or I just thought that, you know, if I can do this, then bam, you know, I'm good and I'm set and I can hang out on a yacht and sip pina coladas, you know, for the rest of my life or something. Like, that has zero interest to me. And it's because I want to actually experience and steward the transitions for people from places where they've been really challenged to places where they're thriving and actualized and powerful. I believe there's a superhero inside of everyone. And that's actually really principle number 2 is that.
So can we just define that the first principle is about empathic interconnectivity?
Yeah, beautifully said.
So that we don't just simply live within the conceit of our own perceptual range. We allow ourselves to open our hearts into the experience of other, even though they may be in severe travail. Number two,
Yeah.
I'm just aware of the time, you see, because we have 4 minutes.
Thank you.
So number two.
Yeah, number two, that there is a superhero within everyone. That every single person has a gift, special, magical, deep, profound gift, a gift that can change people's lives around them, a gift that can change the world if they would let it, if they'd allow themselves to be big enough to do that. And how do these gifts arise? What occurs to enable these gifts to arise, and also for people to be able to practice and implement those gifts into their daily lives?
Yeah.
Well, that phase is actually looking at not only what drives people, but where do they turn on? Where do they actually get in that zone where they're the most enlivened, where they're the most activated? And a lot of that happens through the right kind of recognition. People struggle so much because nobody ever tells them how amazing they are. And when they actually hear how amazing they are, it's so shocking to the system that they don't receive very much of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're trained through social systems and games right now that what makes you awesome is how many people follow you.
Yeah.
And so we have this program running that unless we have this many followers, then we're just not good enough. We're like not that special. We're not that cool.
But we can leave that over there with the illusion.
We can leave that with the illusion. But we need to also understand the empathic side of that.
Number three.
Yeah.
Because we got the principle of what you're suggesting.
Yes.
And we know that the plutonic energy of this year, particularly as we ride through these middle months, and it's midsummer on Wednesday. Yay! We know that plutonic energy is indicating to us that the king archetype is diminishing, is no longer. And therefore, the archetype of the superhero comes in, which is what you're answering. Yeah. So number three.
Yeah. So we need the empathic intuition to get through the final phase of number two. It's actually realizing that, yes, everyone has egos. We're all driven by self-interest at some level. So how do we actually then leverage that and create the process and the formula that supports that self-interest, but guides it towards the level of ethics that you, I think, are deeply interested in, and that many of us are.
Yeah.
So, and then phase three is creating the regenerative circuit. It's creating the circuit where someone can go through liberation, step into superhero nature, then become actually a guide, a leader, and a steward, helping to drive others through that process.
Yeah.
So we're creating this backflow that's moving money, that's moving people, that's moving resources, and it's all happening out of joy, excitement, engagement, desire to make a difference, desire to be better, desire to be stronger. And there's a whole series of ways that we can actually do that and play this as a world game. And this is baked into the heart of this project that I'm building called Core Nexus. So another time, perhaps.
We feel your zeal. It's beautiful.
You.
Adam, what you're sharing is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And unfortunately, we're going to have to come to a close. And there are many, many, many comments in the comment box, which I haven't been able to address because I'm absolutely fixated by I'm mesmerized by your conversation. And, I am in congruence, in absolute coherence with what you're saying. And I'm working with some leading thought keepers around the planet who are also beginning to develop similar conversations. So just as a piece of serendipity, just as a piece of synchrony, remember at the beginning of our conversation, before we came on air, the whole substance of sacred love and compassion came up. Guess what the bottom card was? That was the top card from the top of the order. But the bottom card was empathy.
Yeah.
The holy healer, Raphael, bringing in empathy. By the way, this representation is because when the angels came to me, they came as orbs, as they have been doing since as far as I can remember. I can remember looking out of my crib and seeing orbs. Adam Apollo,
Beautiful.
this has been the most amazing conversation. And I hope to be able to return to this at some point in the future and hear about how Nexus has grown for you and for all the participants. And I would love in some way, shape or form to be part of it.
Thank you. I'd be honored.
It's been a wonderful anthem to what future enhancement is all about at this time. So I really thank you deeply from the very core of my soul. And for all you wonderful people tuning in, I'll look into your comments later. I know you've all really appreciated this vital, charismatic individual that we've had with us this evening. So thanks for tuning in, and keep going back and listening to the recording. You know, this all of my work is recorded. And don't forget that on Sunday, I will be running an online workshop for the summer solstice called The Voice of Your Soul. Please stay where you are, Adam. Thank you so much. And Ryan, thank you so much. We'll close down.